Imagine leaving everything behind at 75 years old. Your home, your friends, your entire life, gone. Most people would call you crazy, but Abraham didn't just survive that decision. He became extraordinarily wealthy. So wealthy that at one point, the land literally couldn't contain all his possessions. We're talking about cattle, silver, and gold in such abundance that he had to separate from his own nephew just to find enough space for his business to operate. But here's what's really interesting. Abraham wasn't born into wealth. He didn't inherit an empire or have some magical advantage that the rest of us don't have. He started as a nomad in a world where most successful people stayed in one place, built their roots, and never moved again. Yet somehow, he managed to do the exact opposite and became one of the most successful entrepreneurs in history. So what did he do right? How did a man with no formal education, no business degree, no connections in high places, manage to build an empire that lasted for generations? The answer isn't complicated. It's not some secret formula that only the elite know about. It's actually 4 simple principles that Abraham lived by. 4 decisions that changed everything. And the crazy part? These principles still work today. They work for entrepreneurs, for business owners, for anyone who wants to build something meaningful. The question is, are you willing to apply them? What if I told you that a man who lived 3,000 years ago built a business empire so massive that it literally broke the land? Abraham didn't just own a few cattle. He owned thousands upon thousands of livestock, along with silver and gold in quantities that would make modern billionaires jealous. In Genesis, it says he was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. But here's the shocking part. This wasn't inherited wealth or some lucky break. This was a man who started with nothing and built an empire through pure strategy and vision. What made Abraham's wealth even more extraordinary was how he built it. He was a nomad, constantly moving from place to place, which was completely unconventional for his time. While other successful people were settling down in cities, building permanent structures, and establishing roots, Abraham was doing the opposite. He was managing massive herds across different territories, employing hundreds of workers, and expanding his operations wherever he went. His business model was so successful that it created an unexpected problem. His wealth grew so fast that he and his nephew Lot couldn't even live on the same land anymore. The land literally couldn't support both of their possessions. But here's what most people miss when they hear this story. They think Abraham's wealth was just about luck or timing, or being in the right place at the right time. They assume that because he lived in a different era, his success doesn't apply to us today. But that's exactly where they're wrong. The real secret to Abraham's wealth wasn't about cattle or land or the economy of ancient times. It was about 4 fundamental decisions he made. Decisions that shaped not just his business, but his entire life. And the first of those decisions? It was something that required more courage than anything most of us will ever face. At 75 years old, Abraham received a command that would terrify most people. Leave your country. Leave your family. Leave everything you know and go to a place you've never been. No GPS, no map, no guarantee of success, just a voice telling him to go. And here's the crazy part. He actually did it. He packed up his entire life, gathered his wife, his nephew, all his possessions, and walked away from Egypt, one of the most powerful nations on earth at that time. Most people would have said no. Abraham said yes, and that single decision changed everything. But this wasn't blind faith or reckless abandon. This was strategic thinking disguised as faith. While other entrepreneurs were trapped in the comfort of their established cities, locked into their routines and their familiar markets, Abraham was free. Free to adapt, free to explore new territories, free to scale his business in ways that stationary competitors could never imagine. He understood something that most modern entrepreneurs still don't get. Sometimes the biggest competitive advantage isn't what you know. It's your willingness to move when everyone else is standing still. His faith gave him agility. His faith gave him options. His faith gave him access to markets and opportunities that his competitors couldn't even see because they were too comfortable where they were. So faith, in Abraham's case, wasn't about religion. It was about vision. It was about having the courage to trust in something bigger than your current circumstances. It was about being willing to sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term growth. But here's the thing. Faith alone doesn't build empires. You can have all the vision in the world, but if you don't know how to treat people, if you don't understand the power of relationships, you'll end up isolated and alone. And that's exactly where the second key comes in. A principle that Abraham understood so well that it became the foundation of his entire legacy. Here's something that will blow your mind about Abraham's business strategy. When he and his nephew Lot arrived in Canaan with their massive herds, they faced a problem. There wasn't enough land for both of them. So Abraham did something that most modern entrepreneurs would consider absolutely insane. He let Lot choose first. Not only that, he gave Lot the better land, the more fertile land, the land that any rational businessman would have kept for himself. From a pure financial standpoint, this made zero sense. But Abraham understood something that most people still don't. Generosity isn't weakness in business. It's the most powerful currency you can possess. Abraham didn't just give away land and walk away. He dug wells across the territories he traveled through, infrastructure that served entire communities. Centuries later, people were still trying to destroy those wells because they were so valuable. Think about that for a second. Abraham's generosity created a legacy that lasted for generations. He was building reputation, trust, and relationships, while other entrepreneurs were focused solely on extracting maximum profit. And here's the business insight that changes everything. People want to do business with someone they trust. They want to partner with someone who has a track record of treating others fairly. Abraham's generosity wasn't charity. It was the smartest investment he could have made in his own brand and his own network. But here's where it gets really interesting. Abraham's nephew Lot started with the exact same advantages. He had wealth, he had resources, he had opportunity, he even got the better land. But Lot made a different choice. Instead of building relationships and focusing on long-term value, he looked toward the city of Sodom, toward quick gains and immediate gratification. And while Abraham continued to prosper, Lot's empire crumbled. He lost everything. This brings us to the third key that separated Abraham from every other successful entrepreneur of his time. And it's something that requires a completely different kind of strength. You want to know what separates people who talk about success from people who actually achieve it? It's this. Abraham received the worst land. When he let Lot choose first, Abraham didn't get the fertile plains of Jordan. He got the rough, less developed territory. Most people would have complained. Most people would have made excuses. Most people would have blamed their circumstances for their lack of success. But Abraham did something completely different. He worked. He worked harder than anyone around him, and his wealth didn't just survive on bad land. It absolutely exploded. Think about what this actually means. Abraham wasn't just managing livestock. He was innovating. He was building infrastructure like those wells we talked about. He was expanding geographically, moving into new territories, and establishing new markets. He was negotiating with local leaders, building alliances, and creating trade networks. By the time we get to Genesis 21, Abraham had made treaties with kings and generals. This wasn't luck. This wasn't divine intervention doing all the work for him. This was a man who understood that success requires constant effort, constant improvement, and constant expansion. He was doing the work that others weren't willing to do. And here's the critical insight that most people miss. Abraham's generosity and his relentless work weren't in conflict. They were complementary. He gave to communities, yes, but he also demanded excellence from himself. He blessed others, but he never stopped pushing his own boundaries. He was kind, but he was also ruthless about his own growth. This combination, generosity paired with an unwavering work ethic, is what created sustainable, long-term wealth. But there's one more element that tied everything together. One more principle that Abraham lived by that made all of this possible. And without it, all the work and all the generosity in the world wouldn't have mattered. The reason Abraham's work was so effective wasn't just because he worked hard. It was because he worked with purpose. Every well he dug, every alliance he built, every territory he expanded into was part of a larger vision. He wasn't just grinding away mindlessly, hoping something would stick. He was strategically building an empire with intention and direction. This is what separates true entrepreneurs from people who are just busy. True entrepreneurs understand that hard work without direction is just exhaustion. But hard work aligned with a clear vision, that's unstoppable. That's what transforms rough land into prosperity. That's what turns a nomad into a legend. So we've covered 3 keys now. Faith that gives you the courage to move, generosity that builds your network and reputation, and relentless work that transforms opportunity into reality. But Abraham had something else, something that Lot didn't have. Something that kept Abraham focused on his vision, even when the world was offering him every distraction imaginable. And this 4th key? It's the one that explains why Abraham ended up as one of history's greatest entrepreneurs, while Lot ended up losing everything. It's the principle that separates the winners from the people who had every advantage but still failed. Here's a question that will change how you think about success. Why did Lot fail when he started with every advantage that Abraham had? They both left Egypt together. They both had wealth. They both had opportunity. They both received blessings from God. Yet Abraham became a legend, while Lot lost everything and ended up living in a cave. The answer isn't complicated, and it's not about luck or timing. It's about where they chose to direct their attention. Abraham pitched his tent facing an altar. Lot pitched his tent facing the city of Sodom. And that single difference in focus determined their entire destinies. This is where the story gets dark, and it's important you understand why. Lot saw the city of Sodom and saw opportunity. He saw luxury, he saw wealth, he saw immediate gratification, and he was drawn to it. Abraham, on the other hand, kept his eyes fixed on something bigger, on a vision that transcended the immediate world around him. While Lot was getting distracted by the glitter of the city, Abraham was building something that would last for generations, and when destruction came to Sodom, Lot's wife couldn't even leave. She looked back at the city she loved, and according to the story, she turned to salt. She literally couldn't let go of what was destroying her. This isn't just a religious story. It's a psychological and business lesson about the danger of divided attention. The principle here is brutal and simple. Your focus determines your future. Abraham didn't just work hard. He worked hard on the right things. He didn't just build relationships. He built them with people and in places that aligned with his vision. He didn't just accumulate wealth. He accumulated it in service of something greater than himself. Lot had the same opportunities, but his focus was scattered. He was chasing immediate gains instead of building long-term value. And that's the difference between someone who builds an empire and someone who loses everything. But now that we understand all 4 keys, there's one final piece of the puzzle that ties everything together. Think about what focus actually means in a business context. It's not just about working on one thing. It's about filtering out the noise. It's about saying no to opportunities that don't align with your vision, even if they look attractive in the moment. Abraham had to say no to comfort in Egypt. He had to say no to the easier path. He had to say no to the distractions that surrounded him. Every single day, he was making a choice to keep his eyes on his vision instead of on the world's temptations. This is what separates entrepreneurs who build lasting empires from entrepreneurs who have a few good years and then fade away. Focus isn't just about discipline. It's about having a vision so clear and so compelling that everything else becomes irrelevant. And here's what's absolutely fascinating about Abraham's story. He didn't just have focus. He had the kind of focus that was unshakable. Even when his business was expanding beyond imagination, even when he had more wealth than he could manage, even when the world was offering him every distraction imaginable, he stayed locked in on his vision. This is the 4th key that made everything else possible. Without faith, you don't have the courage to start. Without generosity, you don't build the relationships that sustain you. Without relentless work, you don't create the opportunities. But without unwavering focus, all of those things fall apart. You become like Lot, scattered, distracted, and ultimately destroyed by the very things you thought would make you successful. So now that we understand all 4 keys, let's see how they come together to create something truly extraordinary. Abraham's story isn't ancient history locked away in dusty pages. It's a blueprint for anyone willing to build something meaningful in a world that constantly demands shortcuts. The 4 keys he lived by: faith as strategy, generosity as currency, relentless work, and unwavering focus, aren't religious concepts. They're business principles. They're life principles. And they work today just as powerfully as they did 3,000 years ago. When facing the decision to leave everything behind, Abraham teaches something profound about courage. Not the kind of courage that comes from certainty, but the kind that emerges when someone trusts in a vision larger than their current circumstances. In modern life, this translates to something deeply relatable: the willingness to pivot when the market shifts, to leave a comfortable job for a meaningful calling, to walk away from relationships that no longer serve growth. Every person who has ever built something significant has faced that same moment of choice: stay comfortable or step into the unknown. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't often comes down to whether they had the faith to take that first step. Generosity, as Abraham demonstrated, isn't about charity or religious obligation. It's about understanding that relationships are the true currency of success. In an age of transactional networking and personal branding, Abraham's approach stands out as radical. He gave the better land to Lot. He dug wells for communities that would never directly benefit his business. He built a reputation for trustworthiness that became his greatest asset. Today, in a world obsessed with extracting maximum value, those who choose to build genuine relationships, to invest in others without immediate return, to create value for their communities, these are the people who build empires that last. The wells Abraham dug became legendary. What legacy are people building through their generosity? The relentless work that transformed rough land into prosperity speaks to something that modern culture often tries to minimize. There are no shortcuts to meaningful success. Abraham didn't inherit his wealth. He didn't stumble into it. He built it through consistent, strategic effort over decades. In a time of viral success stories and overnight millionaires, this is a sobering reminder. Real wealth, whether financial, relational, or spiritual, requires showing up day after day, improving incrementally, pushing boundaries, and refusing to accept mediocrity. The work was hard. The work was unglamorous. But the work was what transformed possibility into reality. But perhaps the most critical lesson, the one that separates Abraham from Lot despite their identical starting points, is focus. Lot had everything Abraham had. He made different choices about where to direct his attention. He looked toward the city. He became fascinated by immediate gains. He lost sight of the larger vision. And when the moment of crisis came, he couldn't leave. His wife couldn't leave. They were trapped by their own divided loyalties. In a world of infinite distractions, social media, comparison culture, the constant pull of what others are doing, maintaining unwavering focus on a personal vision has become perhaps the rarest and most valuable skill. It's the difference between someone who dabbles in many things and someone who builds mastery in one. It's the difference between someone who follows trends and someone who creates them. The profound truth embedded in Abraham's story is this: extraordinary results don't come from extraordinary circumstances. They come from ordinary people making extraordinary choices, consistently, over time. Faith that moves despite uncertainty. Generosity that builds when others extract. Work that persists when others quit. Focus that remains steady when the world screams for attention. These aren't superhuman qualities. They're human choices, and they're available to anyone willing to make them. As people navigate their own journeys, whether building businesses, raising families, pursuing callings, or simply trying to live with integrity in a complicated world, Abraham's example becomes a mirror. It reflects back the question that matters most. What vision is worth leaving comfort for? What relationships are worth investing in without guarantee of return? What work is worth showing up for day after day? And most importantly, what distractions are worth saying no to in order to stay true to that vision? The story doesn't end with Abraham's wealth. It ends with a legacy that shaped civilizations, influenced billions of people across 3,000 years, and continues to inspire anyone seeking to understand what it means to build something that lasts. That's the real measure of success, not the accumulation of possessions, but the creation of something that transcends the individual and serves something greater. The question that lingers after Abraham's story is simple but transformative. If faith, generosity, work, and focus could transform a nomad into a legend, what could they transform in the lives of those willing to apply them? The answer isn't found in ancient history. It's found in the choices made today, in the decisions about where to direct attention, in the willingness to trust in a vision that hasn't yet fully materialized, and in the commitment to build something meaningful, one day at a time. Abraham's story reveals something that extends far beyond individual success. It reveals a principle about community and shared growth. Just as Abraham built wells that served entire communities, this exploration of Scripture is meant to be shared, discussed, and built upon together. The insights gained from studying Abraham's life become richer, deeper, and more transformative when they're examined through multiple perspectives. For those who found value in this study, who felt something shift in their understanding of faith, generosity, work, and focus, there's a natural next step. Subscribing to this channel isn't just about receiving content. It's about joining a community of people committed to understanding Scripture at a deeper level, to extracting timeless principles from ancient stories, and to applying those principles to modern life. Each subscriber becomes part of a growing movement of seekers who believe that the Bible contains not just spiritual wisdom, but practical guidance for building meaningful lives. The comments section below this video is where the real learning happens. Abraham's story raises profound questions. What vision is worth leaving comfort for? How does generosity function as a business strategy? What does unwavering focus look like in a distracted world? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're invitations to reflection. Sharing thoughts, questions, and personal applications in the comments doesn't just contribute to the conversation. It helps others see angles they might have missed. It builds the collective understanding of the community. Sharing this video with others who are on a spiritual journey, who are seeking to understand Scripture more deeply, or who are building something meaningful in their lives, is an act of service. It's extending the same generosity that Abraham demonstrated. It's saying to someone else, "This might matter to you. This might change how you think about your own journey." In a world saturated with content that distracts and divides, sharing content that educates and unites is a countercultural act. Turning on notifications ensures that as new chapters of this biblical exploration unfold, as deeper stories are examined, as more principles are extracted, as the narrative of Scripture continues to reveal its wisdom, no insight is missed. Each new video builds on the foundation of previous studies, creating a comprehensive understanding of how biblical principles shape lives and civilizations. But beyond the mechanics of engagement, there's something more important at stake. Every person who engages with this content, who thinks deeply about these principles, who applies them to their own life, and who shares them with others, becomes a carrier of these truths. Abraham's legacy didn't end with his death. It continued through his descendants, through the people he influenced, through the wells he dug that served generations. In the same way, the insights gained from studying Scripture don't end with passive viewing. They multiply when they're discussed, questioned, applied, and shared. This channel exists because there's a hunger, a deep, often unspoken hunger, to understand the Bible not as a collection of ancient stories, but as a living document filled with principles that work. There's a desire to see how faith, generosity, work, and focus shaped one of history's greatest figures, and to understand how those same principles can shape modern lives. That hunger is what builds community. That hunger is what transforms isolated viewers into engaged participants in a shared journey of discovery. The invitation, then, is simple. Become part of this community. Subscribe, comment, share, turn on notifications. Not because the algorithm demands it, but because the pursuit of biblical wisdom is a communal endeavor, because insights are meant to be discussed, because principles are meant to be applied, because stories like Abraham's are meant to inspire not just individual transformation, but collective growth. As the journey through Scripture continues, may each person who engages with these studies find the same courage that Abraham found to step into the unknown, the same generosity to bless those around them, the same relentless commitment to meaningful work, and the same unwavering focus to build something that lasts. The wells have been dug. The invitation stands. The community awaits.